In the annals of the Great Void, a name begins to stir both awe and unease: Lan Yutian. Tales of Herding Gods, Chapter 1270. Chapter 1274 traces his unseen steps. How, emerging from seclusion, he drew thousands to his cause with nothing but a whisper of the Tao. Qin Mu, nursing wounds and calculating every move, watches as the young disciple's influence spreads like wildfire, even as the Grand Emperor stirs from the shadows of space. A headless colossus whose every step threatens to crumble the stars beneath him. From the scattered gods left dazed in his wake to the shattered fragments of the Tai Chu Origin Stone, the pieces of fate shift violently. Each decision, each pursuit, each hidden motive converges toward a confrontation whose consequences may reshape the heavens themselves. As alliances form, betrayals loom, and destinies collide, the stage is set. Who will master the stones, and who will be crushed beneath the weight of their own ambition? A man disappears from a lantern, and 3,000 gods abandon the heavens just to follow him. That is the terrifying heart of this chapter. Not because of brute force, not because of some heaven-shattering divine art, but because one wandering cultivator, completely lost and barely aware of the world around him, begins walking a path so pure that even immortals cannot resist following behind him. And honestly, this may be one of the most important philosophical chapters in Tales of Herding Gods. The chapter opens in the aftermath of chaos. The celestial heavens are still trying to stabilize the battlefield after the disaster of the walking corpses and heart devils. Tension hangs everywhere. Even the so-called distinguished meeting between the high-level powers feels poisonous beneath the surface. Qin Mu acts weak and heavily injured, coughing constantly while pretending he should lead troops into battle, but everyone immediately shuts the idea down, and this moment is more important than it first appears, because Qin Mu understands something the others do not. The battlefield is no longer decided by armies alone. The real struggle now is ideological. Whoever controls the future path of cultivation controls the future of the world itself. Celestial Venerable Huo secretly wants Qin Mu dead, hoping the battlefield can finish him off after his divine arts were broken earlier. But nobody dares openly send Qin Mu to die while he is supposedly injured. So for now, the killing intent remains hidden beneath political courtesy. That calm atmosphere doesn't last long. Qin Mu quietly seeks out Bai Yujing to check on Lan Yutian. And this is where the chapter suddenly transforms from political tension into something almost mythological. Lan Yutian is gone, notes caped, not rescued, simply gone. The lantern that once contained him is empty, and their action from Qinwan Bai Yujing says everything. Both immediately panic. Because Lan Yutian is not merely powerful, he is dangerous in a completely different way. Most cultivators pursue power. Most celestial venerables pursue authority. Most geniuses pursue victory. Lan Yutian pursues Tao itself, purely, absolutely, without distraction. That kind of person becomes terrifying because they naturally overturn the world around them without even intending to. The search begins across Westfall Divine City, and the clues become increasingly absurd. Lan Yutian casually told people he was Bai Yujing's younger brother and walked right out. Then the real madness starts. Everywhere he goes, people begin following him, about first a dozen, then 100, then over 1,000. Not through coercion, not through demonic arts, not through mind control. They follow because listening to him speak about Tao brings the making of peace they have never experienced before. This is one of the most fascinating cultivation concepts in the entire series. Lan Yutian isn't conquering people through strength. He is awakening something inside them. The fallen gods Qin Mu encounters later all describe the same sensation: clarity, calmness, enlightenment. Questions that haunted them for centuries suddenly become understandable. And that terrifies them. That psychological detail is brilliant, because true enlightenment in Xianxia stories is often more frightening than death. When someone suddenly realizes the path they devoted their entire life to may have been wrong, their entire identity collapses. That is why many followers eventually stop and break away from Lan Yutian's procession. Some sit silently beside ponds. Others lie beneath trees in shock. Some wander aimlessly. Some return home. Their souls have been shaken. Not damaged by force, but destabilized by revelation. And this is where the chapter becomes something much larger than a simple plot progression. Lan Yutian is unknowingly creating a sect, not through organization, not through ambition, not through recruitment, People simply follow him because his existence itself embodies Tao. That is why Qin Mu becomes emotional. He recognizes something historic unfolding before his eyes. The chapter then dives into one of the deepest themes in Tales of Herding Gods, what it truly means to become a saint. Not a saint in the moral sense, a saint in the cultivation civilization sense. Qin Mu reflects on the ideal of the heavenly saint cult, establishing a cult, establishing teachings, establishing merit, and becoming a saint. This sounds simple on paper, but the story makes it clear that almost nobody can achieve it. Woodcutter tried. Wei Suifeng tried. Qin Mu himself is still trying. All of them possessed overwhelming talent and world-changing ambition, yet every one of them became trapped by the sheer scale of their goals. Woodcutter wanted to create a complete system for post-celestial Tao cultivation. His ambition was so enormous that it crushed him beneath its weight. Wei Suifeng sought to uncover the truth of history and correct the corruption of the heavens. Again, too massive, too dangerous. Qin Mu wants to overthrow the celestial heavens entirely while reforming cultivation itself, and even he has nearly been destroyed repeatedly by that ambition. But Lan Yutian achieves what they could not almost accidentally. That's the irony. He has no obsession with fame, no political desire, no hunger for authority. He simply walks toward Tao with absolute sincerity. And because of that purity, others naturally gather around him. This is why Qin Mu realizes that Lan Yutian may become the first true saint, not one of the celebrated heroes of history, not one of the mighty rulers of heaven, just a wandering road idiot who keeps getting lost. That contrast is genius writing. The chapter even quietly undermines the prestige of the 9 celestial venerables. Yes, they created the cultivation systems of the age. Yes, their combined contributions changed history. But Qin Mu internally admits something shocking. None of them individually fully qualified as true saints. Only together did their accomplishments reach that level. Lan Yutian, meanwhile, might achieve it alone. And he doesn't even realize it. That is what makes his path so frighteningly pure. There's also another subtle emotional layer here involving Qin Mu himself. For perhaps the first time in a long while, Qin Mu is not jealous, not competitive, not rebellious. He feels proud, almost like a father watching a child finally grow into their own destiny. That final realization hits especially hard when Qin Mu compares himself, Lan Yutian, and Bai Yujing. All three are people struggling against identities forced upon them. Lan Yutian is treated as Celestial Venerable Yu's continuation. Bai Yujing is pressured toward becoming the South deity. Qin Mu himself has always carried burdens placed upon him by fate and history. So when Qin Mu finally tells Bai Yujing he understands why she rejects becoming the vermilion bird deity, it feels incredibly human. For once, Qin Mu stops trying to force destiny onto someone else, and that quiet moment may actually be more important than all the military conflicts surrounding them. Meanwhile, Lan Yutian continues wandering toward Carefree Village with thousands of followers behind him, completely unaware that he is already reshaping the spiritual structure of the era itself. No throne, no banners, no army formations, just a man walking toward Tao. And somehow, that becomes more dangerous than the celestial heavens themselves. The terrifying question now is this: what happens when someone with no interest in ruling the world accidentally gains the spiritual loyalty of countless cultivators? Because history has already shown that the most unstoppable revolutions are never started by tyrants. They are started by believers. A man loses the identity of a celestial venerable and somehow becomes even more terrifying afterward. That is the strange tension running through this part of the story. Because while armies are preparing for war in the Great Void, while the celestial heavens continue tearing the world apart for power, two people quietly walk away from destiny itself. And in doing so, they reveal one of the deepest ideas in Tales of Herding Gods. What happens when someone abandons status, ambition, and even the desire to rule, just to pursue the Tao? This chapter is not built around a massive battle. It is built around philosophy, identity, freedom, and the terrifying purity of a true seeker. The moment Qin Mu decides to stop chasing Lan Yutian is incredibly important. At first glance, it feels strange. They were already close to catching him. Bai Yujing herself cannot understand why Qin Mu suddenly turns back. But Qin Mu's answer reveals how far his understanding has evolved. He no longer sees people as tools, vessels, or inherited identities. Celestial Venerable Yu is gone. South Deity is gone. Even Qin Fengqing is no longer Qin Fengqing. What remains are independent lives. That idea completely opposes the mentality of the celestial heavens, where people are constantly reduced to titles, positions, divine offices, and political value. Qin Mu, despite all his flaws, keeps moving toward a different kind of Tao, one that respects individuality rather than ownership. And honestly, this is why many readers consider Qin Mu fundamentally different from the 10 celestial venerables. Not because he is stronger. At this point, he absolutely is not. Bai Yujing even admits directly that the others surpass him in capability, but she also says something far more important. Their magnanimity cannot compare to his. That line matters. In cultivation worlds, power is easy to worship. But Tales of Herding Gods constantly asks a harder question. What kind of person should hold power? Qin Mu's answer is compassion mixed with recklessness. He is still chaotic, still shameless, still capable of saying absurd things at the worst possible moment. Like when he casually offers to personally study Bai Yujing's body structure for reconstruction purposes. And the scene is hilarious because Qin Mu genuinely does not understand why she becomes furious, but beneath the comedy is a very important cultivation concept. Qin Mu is striving to recreate bodies and souls through the Tao of creation. Not imitation, actual reconstruction. The story quietly reminds us that creation techniques are incomplete without proper vessels, divine weapons, and precise life data. In other words, even godlike creation arts still have limits. You cannot casually recreate a perfect divine existence without understanding both matter and soul at an extremely profound level. This becomes another recurring theme in the novel. Creation itself is dangerous territory. The closer cultivators move toward the authority of creation, the closer they approach domains traditionally reserved for gods, ancient creators, or heaven itself, and Qin Mu is already walking that forbidden road. But the real heart of the chapter begins after Qin Mu leaves, because then the story shifts to Lan Yutian. And honestly, Lan Yutian may be one of the most fascinating characters in the entire series. Founding Emperor meets him expecting to see traces of the old celestial venerable Yu, the legendary figure whose charisma once shook the world itself. Instead, he finds a slightly chubby scholar wandering around talking about incomprehensible Tao theories. That contrast is brilliant. The old celestial venerable Yu carried the aura of a ruler destined to dominate an era. Lan Yutian carries none of that ambition. No hunger for power, no desire to control nations, no obsession with authority. Only curiosity, pure curiosity. And Founding Emperor immediately realizes something terrifying. This is not an act. Lan Yutian is not pretending to be detached from worldly affairs. He genuinely does not care about them. All of his intelligence, all of his terrifying talent, has been devoted entirely to seeking the end of the great Tao. That is why people are drawn to him so naturally, not through political charisma, not through military prestige, not through manipulation, but through pure pursuit of truth. This is one of the strongest philosophical contrasts in the chapter. The 10 celestial venerables use intelligence to secure power. Founding Emperor uses intelligence to shoulder responsibility. Qin uses intelligence to protect the people of the world. But Lan Yutian, he uses everything for the Tao alone. And that kind of purity is both beautiful and frightening, because history of 10 advances thanks to people exactly like him. Obsessive seekers who ignore worldly distractions and push civilization forward through discovery. But such people are also dangerous in another way. They rarely understand ordinary human suffering. Yan Yunxi's response to Founding Emperor is extremely important because she grounds the conversation back in reality. She basically argues that if everyone became like Lan Yutian, nobody would care for the weak. And she is right. A pure seeker may advance civilization, but someone still has to carry responsibility. Someone still has to defend kingdoms, protect mortals, feed armies, make impossible compromises. This is why Founding Emperor's final realization hits so hard. He envies Lan Yutian's freedom, but he also understands that his own role is different. People like Founding Emperor exist so that people like Lan Yutian can pursue the Tao without distraction. That line may quietly contain the entire political philosophy of this arc. Civilization survives because some people sacrifice freedom for duty, while others sacrifice worldly attachment for truth. Neither path is easy. Neither path is complete on its own, and that is why this chapter is called A Different Tao. Not merely because characters cultivate different techniques, but because they embody fundamentally different ways of living. Qin Mu walks the Tao of compassion and rebellion. Founding Emperor walks the Tao of responsibility. Lan Yutian walks the Tao of pure pursuit. Three geniuses, three philosophies, three completely different answers to the same question. What is the purpose of power? And the scary part is, the story never tells us which answer is truly correct. But something else is happening beneath the surface here. Lan Yutian's influence is already spreading. More disciples gather around him naturally. People begin following him without even realizing it. That kind of attraction is dangerous in a cultivation world, because true seekers often become the center of entirely new eras. And if Lan Yutian continues advancing without worldly attachments restraining him, then the heavens themselves may eventually face a monster they cannot understand. Not a tyrant, not a conqueror, something far rarer. A cultivator who seeks the Tao with absolute purity. And in Xianxia worlds, those are often the people closest to becoming truly immortal. The moment Qin Mu stepped out of the Great Void, the story stopped being about survival and started becoming a game of psychological warfare between monsters, because what waited for him outside was not an army, not a heavenly ambush, not even a celestial venerable. It was something far worse, a wounded ancient terror, quietly watching him from the darkness. And the most chilling part, Qin Mu didn't even realize he had already walked into the creature's hand. This chapter is one of those classic tales of herding gods moments where the author turns pure spatial horror into cultivation storytelling. There's almost no direct battle here. Yet the tension feels heavier than most life and death fights in the series. Why? Because this chapter reminds us that the strongest beings in this world no longer fight only with divine arts. They fight with awareness, calculation, and control over perception itself. As Qin Mu leaves the shattered land of the Great Void, he immediately understands the terrifying strategic problem now facing humanity. Before this point, the Great Void remained relatively safe because of distance. Even celestial venerables needed enormous travel time to move between the celestial heavens and the Great Void. That delay created political balance. Founding Emperor could threaten the heavens because retaliation wasn't immediate. But now, that protection is gone. The collapse of the Void Barrier has exposed the Great Void directly to the outside world. Armies may still require months to arrive, but top-tier cultivators are different. A celestial venerable moving at full speed could descend upon the Great Void within days, and that changes everything. This is actually a very important theme in Xianxia strategy writing. Distance equals security. The moment distance disappears, weaker factions instantly become vulnerable. Qin Mu understands this immediately, which is why his thoughts turn toward celestial venerable Yue. The Void Bridge is still the final shield protecting the Great Void, and only Yue truly understands the spatial structures holding it together. But here's the tragedy. She's crippled. Her Tao injuries are catastrophic. And this is where the chapter quietly reinforces Qin Mu's personality. Even with the world collapsing around him, he still hesitates to burden an injured ally. That compassion is important because most ancient rulers in tales of herding gods would absolutely sacrifice Yue without hesitation. Qin Mu doesn't think like an emperor. He thinks like a human being trying to carry impossible responsibility. Of course, he immediately begins considering alternatives. Tai Chi, the ancient god hidden within the mysterious egg. But Qin Mu already knows the problem. Tai Chi is ancient, cautious, opportunistic, and deeply transactional. After enduring endless imprisonment, this primordial existence no longer helps anyone freely. And honestly, this makes Tai Chi far more believable than many ancient god characters in cultivation novels. Immortality in this world creates paranoia. Endless suffering produces selfishness. The older these beings become, the more they view morality as a negotiable concept, so Qin Mu decides to return toward the celestial heavens while searching for another solution. But then, the chapter shifts, and suddenly the atmosphere becomes terrifying. Qin Mu casually thinks about the Grand Emperor. That tiny thought is the warning sign. One of the scariest mechanics in this entire series is the relationship between consciousness and influence. Powerful consciousness cultivators can affect perception itself. Not through brute force, but through subtle distortion. The instant Qin Mu notices his own thoughts drifting unnaturally, he understands the truth. Someone has already invaded his awareness, and not just anyone. Someone whose consciousness vastly surpasses his own. This realization is horrifying because Qin Mu himself is already among the greatest consciousness experts alive. If even he can be manipulated without noticing, then the enemy operating behind the scenes must be monstrous beyond imagination. What follows is one of the best instant preparation sequences in the novel. Qin Mu reacts immediately. No panic, no hesitation. He activates Yu's lantern, releases Celestial Empress and Mistress Yuan Mu from their coffins, summons Tai Shi's egg, expands his consciousness, raises every defensive measure in a single breath. This scene perfectly captures why Qin Mu survives impossible situations. He is not the strongest, he is not the oldest, he is not the most talented, but head-apps faster than almost anyone else in the story. And then comes the truly eerie part. Silence, no enemy appears, no attack comes. Instead, the darkness begins producing funeral music. This entire sequence feels almost mythological. A ghostly funeral procession emerges from empty space, carried by pale figures wearing deathly makeup, their eyes blank and corpse-like. The imagery is deeply rooted in supernatural Chinese funeral symbolism, but the author twists it into cosmic horror. The procession isn't merely threatening Qin Mu, it is announcing that his death has already been prepared. Even the coffin bears his name. And notice how Qin Mu responds. He mocks it. That's important. Qin Mu understands something crucial about high-level confrontations. Fear itself is part of the attack. Once your Tao heart collapses, defeat follows naturally. So he laughs. He ridicules the display. He deliberately insults the Grand Emperor, not because he isn't afraid, but because fear must never control the rhythm of negotiation. And finally, the truth reveals itself. The Grand Emperor speaks, not from the procession, not from the darkness, but from directly in front of Qin Mu. An enormous headless body sits silently in the void, and this visual carries massive symbolic weight. The Grand Emperor has no head because his consciousness exists separately from his physical form. In Tales of Herding Gods, consciousness is not merely thought. At the highest level, it becomes an independent civilization-ending force. The body is incomplete, but the will remains alive. That alone says everything about how terrifying the Grand Emperor truly is. But the final reveal is even worse. Qin Mu looks downward and realizes the ground beneath him is actually the Grand Emperor's palm. He never escaped. He never found safety. He had been guided exactly where the Grand Emperor wanted him from the very beginning. This is why the chapter feels so oppressive. The Grand Emperor barely moves, yet completely dominates the encounter psychologically. He turns space itself into a trap. And narratively, this moment reestablishes the Grand Emperor as one of the most frightening entities in the series, not because of explosive combat power, but because he weaponizes awareness, fear, and inevitability. Even injured, even complete, even reduced to a headless body, he can still manipulate Qin Mu Ki Ichas piece. And now comes the real question. Why didn't the Grand Emperor kill him immediately? Because this was never just an ambush. It was an invitation, a negotiation between two of the most dangerous minds in the cultivation world. One represents the ancient nightmare of consciousness cultivation. The other represents humanity's unpredictable future, and the next move between them may decide far more than a single battle. It may decide who controls the fate of the great void itself. A headless monster drifted through the void and still terrified the heavens. That's how this chapter opens, not with victory, not with hope, but with the terrifying reminder that some ancient beings in Tales of Herding Gods are so far beyond normal cultivation logic that even dismemberment means nothing to them. The Grand Emperor has no head. One arm is gone. His body is covered in catastrophic wounds. And yet, he still walks through space like an immortal calamity that refuses to die. Why? Because his true source isn't his flesh. His consciousness still exists within the great overarching consciousness heaven, hidden deep in the ultimate void. As long as that terrifying spiritual domain survives, killing his body means almost nothing. This is one of the most important cultivation concepts in this arc. At the highest level, physical destruction is no longer true death, and Qin Mu realizes something horrifying here. Everything he prepared, every contingency, every scheme involving celestial venerable Ling's divine arts might still not be enough against a primordial overlord like this. The confrontation begins almost like a cosmic debt collection. The Grand Emperor demands the Tai Chu Origin Stone back immediately. In his eyes, the deal has already been fulfilled. He fought Celestial Venerable Hao. He crippled him. Therefore, Qin Mu owes payment. But Qin Mu does what he always does best. He argues like a gambler standing at the edge of execution. He points out that Celestial Venerable Hao is still alive in the Great Void. Worse, Hao recovered thanks to Tai Su. From Qin Mu's perspective, the mission failed. The threat still exists. And honestly, Qin Mu isn't completely wrong. But this scene is fascinating because both sides are technically telling the truth. The Grand Emperor did severely injure Hao, but the situation changed because another ancient existence intervened. That detail matters because it shows one of the core themes of Tales of Herding Gods. No plan survives the interference of ancient gods and primordial variables. The universe itself is unstable. History keeps mutating. Even victory can be rewritten. But the Grand Emperor has no patience for philosophical debate. If Qin Mu refuses, then today becomes his funeral. And the terrifying part is that he means it completely. What follows is one of the best psychological pressure scenes in the novel because the Grand Emperor systematically destroys Qin Mu's confidence. Qin Mu threatens mutual destruction using Celestial Venerable Ling's unchanging divine art. Normally, this technique is one of the few powers capable of restraining the Grand Emperor's terrifying consciousness abilities. But the Grand Emperor laughs at him, not because the technique is weak, but because Qin Mu fundamentally misunderstands the scale of the enemy standing before him. This is where the chapter becomes more than just a negotiation scene. It turns into a philosophical statement about cultivation at the highest realms. The Grand Emperor explains that Celestial Venerable Yun, Celestial Venerable Ling, and the heroes of the past all believed they had defeated him. But they only destroyed fragments, shells, manifestations, never the true source. That changes the entire emotional weight of the conflict. Imagine fighting a legendary demon for generations, only to discover you were attacking shadows while the real entity watched from above the entire time. That's the terror Qin Mu faces here. And the visual imagery is incredible. The headless giant walks through shattered space, carrying Qin Mu in his palm like a mortal toy, while dragging an entire funeral procession behind him. It feels less like a battle and more like being escorted to execution by an ancient god. Even Tai Shi, one of the oldest beings alive, basically tells Qin Mu to surrender, and that moment is extremely important. Tai Shi is not arrogant, not prideful, not pretending. He openly admits they cannot win. That honesty reveals just how monstrous the Grand Emperor truly is. In Xianxia stories, ancient entities usually maintain dignity and confidence. But Tai Shi abandons all pretense here and essentially says, survival first, revenge later. That is wisdom born from primordial history. But Qin Mu is still Qin Mu. Even cornered between death and cosmic annihilation, his mind keeps moving. Instead of escalating the fight, he changes the battlefield entirely. From combat to negotiation, and this is classic Qin Mu strategy. He rarely wins through pure power. He wins through understanding value. He realizes the Grand Emperor ultimately wants the Tai Chu Origin Stone more than immediate revenge. So Qin Mu proposes a compromise. Half the stone for half the completed mission. The Grand Emperor almost rejects it immediately because emotionally, he wants Qin Mu dead. You can feel the resentment pouring from him. Qin Mu already ruined previous bodies of his. Now this current vessel is mutilated too. At this point, hatred is personal. But then Qin Mu makes a genius move. He offers 3/4 of the Origin Stone in exchange for Celestial Venerable Hao's heart, and this changes everything. Because Qin Mu understands something critical. The Grand Emperor values restoration more than trophies. Hao's heart is useful, but the Origin Stone is transformational. It can restore his body, restore his dominance, possibly restore his position as one of the most terrifying beings in existence. And this exchange scene is loaded with hidden implications. Qin Mu is gambling that Hao's heart contains future strategic value greater than the missing quarter of the Origin Stone. Meanwhile, the Grand Emperor is gambling that immediate restoration matters more than preserving leverage against Hao. Both sides are planning beyond the current chapter. That's why this negotiation feels so dangerous. Every artifact there could alter the balance of the cosmos later. Then comes the moment that truly reveals how terrifying the Grand Emperor is. Qin Mu shoots the Origin Stone himself. Event the Grand Emperor is visibly shocked. That reaction matters, because the Tai Chu Origin Stone is not some ordinary divine treasure. It's one of the foundational materials connected to primordial creation itself. The fact that Qin Mu can slice it apart demonstrates just how absurd his abilities have become. And yet, even after all this, even after bargaining successfully, even after surviving the negotiation, the chapter ends on a horrifying image. The Grand Emperor places the Origin Stone onto his neck. Instantly, boundless consciousness erupts outward. The energy flooding through him surpasses even what Qin Mu could unleash using the same treasure. And then, a new head begins to grow. That final scene is terrifying for multiple reasons. First, it confirms that the Grand Emperor truly was holding back fragments of his full power all along. Second, it proves that once ancient primordial beings recover their foundations, their regeneration borders on divine inevitability. And third, Qin Mu may have just helped resurrect one of the greatest disasters in existence. That's the brilliance of this chapter. Nobody truly wins. Qin Mu survives but strengthens a monster. The Grand Emperor recovers but loses part of the Origin Stone. Celestial Venerable Hao loses his heart, yet may still remain a threat. Every choice creates future consequences. And honestly, this is what makes Tales of Herding Gods stand above many cultivation stories. Power here is never simple. Victory always has a hidden cost, and ancient history never stays buried. Because sometimes, the most dangerous enemy is not the one you fail to kill, it's the one you accidentally help return to life. What happens when the most dangerous schemer in the heavens decides he can't defeat a monster head-on, so instead, he throws that monster directly at another monster? That is the real heart of this chapter. Not a grand battlefield, not a flashy duel, but Qin Mu quietly moving pieces across the board like a man trying to survive an incoming apocalypse. And the terrifying part? Every single person involved already knows they're being manipulated. The chapter opens with Qin Mu carrying the burden of disaster itself, the fragmented Tai Chu Origin Stone. By now, the Grand Emperor has revived and reclaimed part of his former power, and anyone familiar with the ancient history of the primordial era understands exactly how horrifying that is. The Grand Emperor is not just another cultivator. He represents one of the oldest and most terrifying consciousness-based beings in existence. In ancient times, it took the combined efforts of multiple ancient gods just to bring him down. Even then, they didn't truly destroy him. His body was shattered, his plans were interrupted, but his existence lingered like a curse buried beneath history. And now, he's coming back. What makes this moment fascinating is Qin Mu's reaction. He isn't panicking emotionally. He's calculating. That tells us a lot about Qin Mu's growth as a character. Earlier versions of him might have tried to resist fate directly, but the current Qin Mu understands something fundamental about the cultivation world. Sometimes survival means redirecting catastrophe rather than stopping it. That's why he immediately begins setting traps. And the first major sign of this comes when he meets demon ancestor Mahakala outside the northern heavenly gate. Now, this scene may look simple on the surface, but it actually reveals the larger instability spreading across the great void. Mahakala is being deployed because heart devils are erupting across the battlefield. The celestial heavens specifically choose him because he is essentially a devil among devils, a primordial existence born from Yudu itself. In cultivation terms, this is important. Heart devils in Tales of Herding Gods are not merely illusions or emotional weaknesses. They represent psychological corruption amplified into reality through consciousness and Tao instability. The stronger the cultivator, the more catastrophic the consequences become when those inner demons awaken, and Mahakala is uniquely suited to suppress them because his very existence resonates with demonic law. But then Qin Mu warns him not to approach the true front line. Why? Because Son of You doest there, and Qin Mu already understands the terrifying power gap involved. This is one of those subtle moments where the author reminds us that the world has expanded beyond ordinary Emperor Throne experts. The battlefield of the Great Void is becoming a collision point for ancient entities, primordial powers, and beings connected to the deepest laws of creation. Mahakala may appear mighty to ordinary cultivators, but in this war, even giants can become cannon fodder. Then comes the real masterpiece of manipulation. Qin Mu sends the recovered fragment of the Tai Chu Origin Stone directly to Celestial Venerable Shao, and the moment Shao realizes what's happening, he explodes in fury. Honestly, this scene is almost darkly comedic, because Shao instantly sees through the scheme. He knows Qin Mu is deliberately dragging him into conflict with the Grand Emperor. He knows this gift is basically a death invitation. But the brilliance of Qin Mu's strategy is this: Xiao cannot refuse. That is the key. The Tai Chu Origin Stone is too important. For Celestial Venerable Xiao, this isn't merely a treasure. It is the foundation of his future evolution. His entire ambition revolves around becoming the true Tai Chu, a perfect primordial existence unrestricted by the modern cultivation system. And this chapter finally exposes just how monstrous Xiao's ambitions truly are. He doesn't merely want power. He wants transcendence beyond the structure of the universe itself. Divine treasures, celestial palaces, cultivation realms. To him, these are limitations. That line completely changes how we view Xiao. Most cultivators pursue higher realms within the system. Xiao wants to surpass the system entirely. In many ways, he resembles the classic Xianxia archetype of a heaven-defying cultivator, except twisted into something colder and more terrifying, and his methods are horrifying. He openly contemplates exterminating the masters of creation to reclaim fragmented consciousness power from heaven and earth itself. This is what makes the chapter so dangerous beneath the surface. Almost every major figure here is walking the edge between godhood and monstrosity. The Grand Emperor seeks restoration. Xiao seeks transcendence, and Qin Mu stands between them, weaponizing their hatred against each other. That's the true battle of this chapter. Not fists, not swords. Information, greed, fear, ancient grudges, and Qin Mu wins this round without drawing blood. But there's also a hidden cost here. After giving away the Origin Stone, Qin Mu notices consciousness becoming weaker and less responsive. This detail matters tremendously because it's how deeply the stone had already fused with his cultivation path. The Tai Chu Origin Stone wasn't just equipment, it was slowly changing him, possibly even binding him closer to Celestial Emperor Tai Chu's legacy. So Qin Mu's decision to abandon it is symbolic as well as strategic. He's cutting away a dangerous dependency before it consumes his identity. That's actually our recurring theme throughout Tales of Herding. Gods, power always carries contamination. Every shortcut leaves a mark. Every inheritance demands a price. And then the chapter ends with one of the funniest yet most meaningful moments in classic Qin Mu fashion. After deciding not to use another dangerous Origin Stone as a replacement for his divine eye, he instead shoves Taishi's egg into the empty slot. And Taishi immediately realizes he's been tricked. Again, it's a hilarious ending. But it also reinforces Qin Mu's personality perfectly. Even while standing between cosmic-level conspiracies, he still solves problems with reckless improvisation and shameless practicality. If it works, Qin Mu uses it. Whether that object is a divine treasure, an ancient relic, or an angry primordial god trapped inside an egg. But beneath the humor lies a darker implication. Qin Mu is running out of safe options. The stronger he becomes, the fewer powers exist that don't come attached to ancient curses, primordial wills, or catastrophic karmic consequences. And now, with the Grand Emperor recovering strength and Xiao preparing for inevitable conflict, the entire balance of the primordial world is beginning to crack. The terrifying question is no longer whether war will come. It's whether anyone involved still remembers how to remain human once they obtain the power they seek.